She wasn't asking for love. She was fighting for survival. On the American frontier, one Apache woman's bold demand forced a dangerous alliance that changed two lives forever. Enemies watched, risks grew, and every choice carried a price. If you want to know how this impossible decision unfolds, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Would you have made the same choice? The morning after her demand, the frontier felt different. Word had already traveled faster than the desert wind. Men paused mid-step, conversations died halfway, and eyes followed the Apache woman wherever she moved. She stood tall despite it all, her face calm but guarded. This was not weakness, it was resolve. She understood the risk she had taken. In the Wild West, choices were final and mistakes were buried quickly. Still, she did not look back. Her future depended on one decision, and she had chosen to face it openly, even if it meant standing alone in a land that never truly welcomed her. The rancher watched her from a distance, conflicted. He had lived among suspicion his entire life, but this was different. Helping her meant defying unspoken rules that kept men alive. Yet something about her honesty unsettled him. She wasn't begging. She wasn't threatening. She was offering truth. That night, he barely slept, haunted by memories of loss and regret. He had survived the frontier by keeping to himself. But survival without purpose had grown heavy. By sunrise, he knew that turning away would be easier. But courage had never been about choosing the easy path. They spoke little when they finally met again. Words felt unnecessary. The agreement between them was clear. Protection in exchange for loyalty. Safety in exchange for trust. It was not romance, but it wasn't cold either. The Apache woman explained her situation quietly. Her people were being forced into impossible corners, hunted by enemies and abandoned by broken treaties. Marriage in this harsh world was more than union. It was shield and status. The rancher listened without interruption, realizing that her burden was heavier than any threat. He had faced with a rifle in his hands. The ceremony was simple, almost invisible. No church bells, no crowd, no celebration. Just two people standing under an open sky that offered neither judgment nor mercy. A local witness nodded, paperwork signed, and it was done. To outsiders, it looked rushed and meaningless. But in truth, it marked the beginning of something irreversible. The Apache woman crossed a line she could never uncross. The rancher did the same. From that moment on, their lives were no longer separate stories, but a single path carved through dangerous ground. Life at the ranch tested them immediately. Neighbors kept their distance. Some stared with open hostility, others with quiet curiosity. Nights were tense, filled with distant sounds and unseen movement. The Apache woman adapted quickly, learning the rhythms of ranch life with discipline and patience. She rose before dawn, worked without complaint, and watched everything. The rancher noticed how alert she was, how she never let her guard down. This was not fear. It was survival instinct sharpened by years of danger. Slowly, respect replaced uncertainty between them. Trust did not come easily. Silence often filled the space between them, but it was not empty. In that silence, they observed each other. He saw her strength, not just in action, but in restraint. She saw his fairness, how he treated workers with dignity and never spoke carelessly. One evening, as the sun sank low, they shared a meal without tension for the first time. No promises were made, yet something shifted. They were no longer strangers bound by necessity, but allies learning how to stand together without falling apart. Trouble came as expected. Riders appeared near the property line, watching, testing boundaries. Some were settlers who disapproved. Others were men who saw opportunity in conflict. The rancher prepared defenses quietly, while the Apache woman warned him of tactics she recognized. Together, they prevented disaster more than once, not through violence, but through awareness. Their cooperation surprised even themselves. Each challenge strengthened their bond, turning obligation into partnership. The land seemed to recognize this balance, offering moments of calm between storms that threatened to tear everything apart. Rumors spread beyond the valley. Some claimed the rancher had been tricked. Others said he had betrayed his own kind. Meanwhile, whispers reached the Apache woman's people, mixed with anger and confusion. She carried the weight of both worlds, belonging fully to neither. Yet she did not regret her choice. She had secured time, time for her people, time for peace, time to breathe. That alone made every sacrifice worthwhile. Even when loneliness crept in, she reminded herself that survival often demanded courage, disguised as isolation. One night, danger arrived unannounced. Shadows moved too close, intentions clear. The rancher and the Apache woman stood side by side, ready. But the confrontation ended without bloodshed. Her calm authority and his firm stance sent a message. This land was not unguarded, and its people were not divided. As the threat faded into darkness, they exchanged a glance that said more than words ever could. In that moment, they understood that what they had built was real, forged not by tradition, but by shared risk and mutual respect. By the time another season approached, the frontier saw them differently. They were no longer a rumor or a scandal, but a fact. Two lives joined against expectation, standing firm where others failed. What began as a desperate demand became a symbol of resilience. The Apache woman had not just changed her fate, she had rewritten it. And the rancher, once alone, found purpose beyond survival. On the unforgiving American frontier, their story Sometimes the bravest decisions are born not from desire, but from necessity, and grow into something far greater. The days that followed tested their fragile unity more than either had expected. The frontier was unforgiving to those who broke its invisible rules, and they had shattered several at once. Supplies became harder to acquire, prices quietly rose, and friendly faces turned cold. Yet neither spoke of regret. The Apache woman understood pressure as a language of control, and she refused to be controlled again. The rancher, though unsettled, stood firm. He had chosen this path, and backing down would only confirm the doubts surrounding them. Each sunrise brought new tension, but also a growing sense that endurance itself was an act of resistance. One afternoon, a rider arrived with news carried like a warning. Conflict near the Apache lands had intensified. The woman listened in silence, her expression unreadable, but her hands clenched tightly. She knew what escalation meant: families displaced, lives lost, history repeating itself. The rancher watched her closely, realizing this marriage was no longer just symbolic. It had placed them at the center of a widening storm. He offered his help without hesitation, though he understood the danger. Helping her people could invite retaliation from authorities and settlers alike. Still, he believed neutrality was no longer an option worth having. They prepared carefully. No reckless moves, no open defiance. The Apache woman advised caution, patience, and strategy learned through generations of survival. The rancher trusted her instincts, even when they contradicted his own experience. Together, they gathered supplies discreetly and mapped safe routes through the land. Their cooperation was seamless, built on respect rather than dominance. This was no longer a contract of convenience. It was a partnership shaped by shared responsibility. In quiet moments, the rancher realized how much he relied on her clarity, while she recognized his steady resolve as a rare form of strength. As they moved closer to Apache territory, the atmosphere shifted. The land felt heavier, watchful. When they finally encountered her people, reactions were mixed. Some saw betrayal, others saw hope. She stood before them calmly, explaining her choice not as surrender, but as strategy. She spoke of survival, time, and the cost of pride in a world designed to erase them. The rancher remained silent, allowing her voice to lead. Though mistrust lingered, her words planted something fragile but powerful: possibility. For the first time in a long while, fear did not dominate every exchange. The return journey was tense. They sensed they were being followed. Every sound carried weight, every shadow seemed alive. That night, danger found them. A group confronted them under the cover of darkness, fueled by anger and suspicion. Voices rose, accusations flew, but the Apache woman stood her ground. She refused to escalate, refused to give violence the power it demanded. The rancher backed her without question, his presence firm but controlled. Eventually, the group withdrew, leaving behind silence thick with consequence. It was a narrow escape, but one that confirmed their strength together. After that night, something changed between them. The silence they once shared grew warmer, more trusting. They spoke more freely, sharing fragments of their pasts without dwelling on pain. The rancher admitted his fear of becoming irrelevant, of surviving without meaning. She spoke of loss without tears, of carrying responsibility too young and too long. These confessions did not weaken them. They grounded them in the vast emptiness of the frontier. They found understanding not through words of affection, but through honesty stripped of expectation. Their bond soon faced its greatest test. Authorities arrived at the ranch, questioning motives and alliances. The air was tense, heavy with implication. The rancher answered carefully, never denying his marriage, never apologizing for it. The Apache woman remained composed, her presence dignified and unyielding. She did not plead for acceptance. She demanded recognition. The exchange ended without resolution, but the message was clear: they were being watched. As the officials departed, uncertainty lingered, but fear no longer ruled them. They had faced worse together. Seasons shifted, and with them perception. The ranch became known as neutral ground, a place where conflict did not automatically mean violence. Some settlers softened, seeing stability where they expected chaos. Some Apache found refuge, even if briefly. The couple never claimed to change the world, but their actions quietly disrupted its patterns. Each small decision echoed outward, reshaping how others approached them. The frontier, once rigid, showed cracks where understanding could grow. It wasn't peace, but it was progress carved through patience. One evening, as the sky burned red with sunset, the Apache woman stood looking across the land she now shared. She had not abandoned her identity. She had expanded it. The rancher joined her, saying nothing. They no longer needed explanations. Their journey had transformed necessity into commitment, survival into purpose. What began as urgency had become intention. They did not know what the future held, only that they would face it together. In a land defined by division, that unity was an act of quiet defiance. By the time winter approached, their story had traveled far beyond whispers. Some would never accept it. Others would learn from it. But acceptance was no longer the goal. They had secured something more valuable: agency over their lives. The Apache woman had demanded a husband to save her people, and found an ally who stood when it mattered. The rancher had risked everything for a choice that gave his life meaning. On the unforgiving American frontier, their union proved that the strongest alliances are forged not in comfort but in courage.